My role as president of Mars this year is to introduce our guest speakers. Bill Wall is the Associate Commissioner of Finance. Bill,
Yeah,
sorry.
that's okay.
Okay.
I've been called worse.
No, we want you to have the ball rolling, I think.
There we go. Well played.
Ruth Birch is hoping to join us
Yeah.
sometime later. She is the Associate Director, I believe, with Office of Regional Government. Ladami Correa is the Strategic Initiatives Coordinator, who had a benefit presentation before. And our Commissioner, Jeff Waller. This Commissioner has set a tone of engagement. He has encouraged, if not challenged, the practitioner to offer recommendations and suggestions for a new accountability system, for a new direction for the educational activities in Massachusetts. And the reaction that I've witnessed throughout multiple settings is one of just an open invitation to contribute and make recommendations. This is a person who is involved in participative government. And it's perfect then that we have an opportunity to gather as regional systems, because we're instruments of partnership across multiple municipalities. And we're very dependent upon the relationships and the developments, both fiscal and programmatic and otherwise, relative to the multiple communities which we represent. It is a challenging time for regional systems. Many of the municipalities are looking at the issues they face within their walls or the confines of the community, and that many times disrupts the harmony of relationships that are critical to the regional partnerships that we represent. So I'd like to invite the Commissioner to offer some introductory comments, but he's already made it clear that he would like to have a kind of open Q&A, and so we're not going to have major remarks or a formal presentation, but we welcome.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We're from the state and we're here to help. I think the best thing I could do would be bring my high school friends to actually tell them, share what I used to be like. Nobody is more shocked than I am in this position that I'm in. You know, we're in a new time in education. We've got to close the door on the ed reform that we've done. And so the time is now to figure out where we're going. Some of that is about the academics. I think we need to return to focus on teaching. But some of that also is about kind of systems and structures for what we're trying to get done here. What that means is finances play a role, and we brought Bill Bell with me today to talk about all things finances. In a time when we're seeing these huge shifts in demographics, particularly out in the western part of the state, regionalization may become an option for more and more people. But I also know that there are things happening inside the regional schools right now that are of concern, and so I need to hear about them, because I want to be clear, I don't have a PhD in how regional schools work. So I'm here more to listen and to hear questions from you than anything. I did make the mistake of staying up for the Red Sox game, so it's going to take me about 5 minutes to actually wake up, but I promise after 5 minutes I'll be back to my usual self.
Thank you very much. Bill, do you wish to offer any introductory comments?
I'll just give you a little lay of the land. Some of you might know it as well as I, but obviously we're just entering into the second quarter of state fiscal 19. As you know, that the budget is a secular process. In the process of doing one budget year, we're actually starting to build next budget years. So state fiscal year 20. There's some good things in the 19 budget overall. I'm well aware of these pockets that aren't addressed, and having a conversation with some folks earlier, we're aware that, efforts to regionalize, and my good friend Steve, wherever Steve is.
Over here.
There you are, Steve. I should know you were right there. Steve is always looking for ways that DESE can help capitalize and incentivize good thinking on the regionalization front. And I know we talk a lot about the need to do so, but sometimes money is the key obstacle to actually starting some of that. The state over the past few years, through some reserve funds, has offered some grant competitions. Those are run out of May on the school finance side, as you know, chapter 70, which is about 14% of the state budget, hit a new high water mark this year for funding. But we know that doesn't equally, or doesn't meet every district's needs, in particular districts with high concentrations of kids who need extra services. And we also know it presents challenges to regional districts as well. I don't know how much folks followed the legislative activity this summer. There was an attempt to relook at how the foundation budget within Chapter 70 was calculated. Both the House and the Senate passed independent bills. They tried to conference those bills in the waning days of their session this past July. That effort did not produce a consolidated bill, so nothing was presented to the governor. But what it did do on a positive, we feel positive, is open the dialogue that the commissioner and the secretary are actively working on to present to the governor this fall about ways to rethink the foundation budget. And I can't share with you exactly where that's going to go, because honestly we don't know. There's probably a small group, about 20 people across multiple state agencies, not only ours, but the Department of Revenue from the municipal side, folks in the Group Insurance Commission who play a key role in this, as well as other entities to potentially offer some recommendations. And we, as you know, we have been implementing recommendations from the Foundation Budget Commission a couple of years ago through our Chapter 70. And I say our, it's not DESI, it's really the Commonwealth, what the Commonwealth finally appropriated over the past few years, particularly in trying to address the special education and the healthcare costs that municipal governments and regional governments face. So there's a lot of work happening in school finance. We're well aware that it doesn't meet everyone's expectations on the municipal front, but trying to find the balance of how much is local versus state is the dialogue that will take place over the next few months. I suspect the governor is going to offer a proposal that will be thoughtful and something for the legislature to consider. We're also a big pass-through entity for federal funding. We distribute about $800 million in federal funding a year, so we're always keeping track of what's happening in Washington. Not the shock and awe stories, but more the stuff underneath the covers of how federal appropriations are working. And for the most part, those appropriations still remain, despite all the concern about the state of the federal budget and the debt that the federal government, the debt rate the federal government is spending at. Those key programs are Title I, our IDEA funds, our school nutrition funds. They have all continued relatively on consistent with some small upticks here or there basis. I could probably talk for an hour and a half on different stuff happening financially, but I think the message I'd like to leave with you is, the commission said it as an opener, but we are listening, we are paying attention. I know DESI sometimes viewed it as this thing, what value do we add to the public education delivery? I personally think we add a lot. I don't have deep education pedigree, although I am a son of a former vice principal at Dedham High School, who Steve knew some years ago in the 70s, but I'm more of a public finance guy. Grew up in human services, welfare, Medicaid, and programs alike. And with me is Ruth Hirsch, who oversees our regional governance and does a lot of work within our office of school and district finance. So I'll probably stop there for right now, Mike, and open it up for wherever the group wants to take it.
Thank you. You will find the group monitors very closely for the development of finance, and I'm sure they will engage in an active conversation while they do that. And the best way to influence the 20 or so individuals that will strike a new arrangement.
Yeah, if I could just for a sec, I know some of you, but for some, you might view, who is this guy? I know Jeff Wilson, I know Jay Sullivan, I knew Cheryl, Jeff Wilson, I report to Deputy Commissioner, but I at the tip of the spear oversee all the financial activity, within the department. So Jay and school finance, Rob O'Donnell, all those folks, on an organization chart work with me, not for me, but we work together, but that's sort of how I orientate. So I also have the world of running the inside operation of the department as well, so you might not see me as much outside meetings, but I'm always available, reachable.
That's helpful, thank you. Ruth, Montani, you wish to offer any introductory comments?
I'd like to say, I'm sorry I'm late. I didn't know I was actually on the panel, but also I was on automatic pilot out to Worcester when I realized, OMG, I'm in the wrong place. And I hope that's not a metaphor for all regional school districts. People are on their way to Worcester and then they lose sight of it. You know, I've been working with regional school districts now just for 6 months, and I've been working closely with Chris Lynch and Jay Sullivan. And as I said before, I'm never gonna, even though I wear size 12, I'm never going to fit into Chris's shoes. But I'm learning rapidly. What I'm seeing more than anything, because I've also worked with educational collaboratives, I see a group of people who are so passionate and want to figure out how to serve their kids well. And my father worked in voc ed, and so I come from that background. But I really hope that as I grow in this role, I can help in whatever way I can to create relationships, to cultivate collaboration, and however I can serve you. And I know I don't have the 40 years of experience that Chris has, but I'll be able to, if I don't have the answer, I'll be able to find out who does. And Chris is still there, she still supervises me, so I have access and I talk to her all the time. And anyway, thank you, and thank you for being so warm to me. And again, I really am sorry that I'm late. I'm actually rarely late, so sorry about that.
I would leave you out.
I think what I would like to say is, echo what the commissioner said earlier and what Bill said is, we're on this journey to listen to you guys and understand how everything works at the state level so that we can actually make informed decisions on where we need to go next. Something the commissioner always talks about is how we've done education in the past and how we need to do it in the future because things have changed. And so today is going to be very informative for us to kind of paint that picture in terms of the work we do. So thank you.
The second half of the welcoming is the team from ours, for Barbara and Steve. And what they've agreed to do is offer a succinct presentation to add to the familiarity that the DESC team and the commission would have relative to regionalization. Barbara, Steve?
First of all, before I begin, I do want to make sure people know that I've been affiliated with Mars since 2008, so it's been coming up 11 years. And in December, I will be leaving as the Assistant Executive Director. Maureen Marshall will be taking over that position. I will still continue working consulting with Mars, looking forward to that change. I don't mind saying I'm 71, I'd like to slow down a little bit, because with my grandchildren, so, in my children. So I think just letting people here to know that changed it, but I still will be available, and doing consulting work. One of the things, Commissioner, we provided you with is our regional schools, and I've worked in municipals and in regions, and regional schools are quite different than municipals in that we're our own entity. And I've put the commissioner on your desk, I think everybody else, the commissioner on your desk has said what is the regional school district. In chapter 7116, and chapter 7116 A, B, and so forth, define regional school districts. And you have to have a law in order to do certain things in a regional school. And a regional school district is unto itself. They have to be concerned with the income and the expenditure side. When I was a municipal, I just sent it down to the treasurer, let him worry about it. But now in regions, we have to be concerned with the total operation, your budget, you're dealing with your payroll, policy, everything is done in a regional school district. It's a standalone entity. I've also listed there are 84 regions, a combination of academics and vocational. And I gave you a list that's off your website, but I wanted to sometimes finding stuff on your website can be a little difficult, so I thought I'd give it to you so that you can see the number of towns that are involved with that. So there's a large number of towns in the 84 regions, and they vary. Again, vocational, academic, you can have 2 towns up to 19 towns, and you can have elementary regions. So to give you that, so you can take a look at that. The other thing to realize is that one of the things is It's very difficult these days because of declining enrollments from like 495 West, there are issues that take place there. And also mentioned about regionalization, we're working with, as part of our consulting group, with regions about updating the regional agreements and also forming regions. I provided you with 2 things about Mars packet, as well as the consulting work that we as well do for that. So it's, again, a region is unto its own, and sometimes it's very, very lean and mean organization. We don't have sometimes like a town hall does, so we have to do everything within the region. I think you're gonna see things coming down where regions and things are gonna be collaborative, sharing stuff and doing things, coming down on the budget side, where you're seeing chapter 70 is not increasing, and yet your costs are going up. So we're working with several districts and reviewing how they can share and what they can do differently in order to have sustainability. So I think that's all I want to get into. Commissioner, so you can know about that, and Barbara?
Maureen.
Maureen?
Certainly, thank you all for being here today and spending a little time with us. My expectation is that you know more about regions than we might imagine. And so what I'm gonna try to do is to not say the same thing as you probably are now. But instead to try to focus a little bit on the role the Department of Education has taken in looking not only at the reform issue, but looking at reimbursement formulas and how they may impact schools. Take, for example, the reimbursement formula for regional school transportation. Every year, the Department of Ed sends in its budget a number that was ever spent last year. Okay? So it's always underfunded because sometimes the legislature or others have said, well, charter schools are really regional schools, and now they can get transportation reimbursement. They know from our chapter or from our end-of-year reports that some of us have increased transportation costs because of new contracts. But they send the same number to the governor as they prepare the budget, which is always underfunded, which leaves all of us saying, okay, now we have to spend inordinate amounts of time working with our representatives in the House, those people who represent us in the Senate, so we've got to fight for regional transportation, we've got to fight for regional transportation. And the question they ask is, well, why does DESE not reflect these increases in its own budget, so at least we have a starting point that's different than whatever we spent last year? So, as you look at preparing your budget, as you said, Bill, you'll be doing, we're saying, okay, can we talk about maybe what DESE might send to the governor, so that maybe that fight with the legislators takes less of our time? I will tell you that conservatively, regional superintendents spend hours working with their reps, working with DESE, working with the governor's office, working with A&F to try to work through transportation funding that gets toward an 80% number. We understand that while it says 100% in legislation, subject to appropriation, that, as Senator Brewer always would say, we're not going to give you 100% because there's no incentive for you, the regions, to sort of consolidate things and to make transportation as cost effective as possible. So we urge you to think about when you put that budget forward, is it still prudent to just level fund it from the previous year, knowing that many of us have new contracts, unfortunately, that are going up, and also that we have new entities, new charter schools that can access regional school transportation funding. So that was my sort of complaint, whining, whatever you want to call it, but it's something that I don't know if DESE thinks a lot about. It's just always been level funded, and people have said to DESE in years past, you guys do such a good job fighting for your own money. Well, all that time that instructional leaders spend, worrying about funding for transportation, we don't spend doing stuff like complaining about the accountability system and how it doesn't work. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's something, but, so that's one of our huge concerns, that as we look, I know it seems like a little thing to you, but transportation reimbursement for regions is huge. And also, when you look at our transportation for special education students, we oftentimes, on 30 or 40 kids, exceed expenditure amounts for those students to go to their placements than for the other 2,000 kids that we're transporting. And that's basically because if we want to go to the New England Center from where the say the Quantum Regional District or districts that are west of Worcester, because we still have to access really in the Boston area some of those programs, it costs us more money with absolutely no reimbursement to send the vans and the students to those very, very far away placements. It's not like we are within 10 or 15 miles. We are sending students oftentimes 70 miles one way. We're sending students and sometimes to Crotchet Mountain, which is one of the placements that is often approved because it's so particular and specific. We're spending, I can't even tell you how many hours that poor child is on the road, let alone with no reimbursement. So the impact of transportation reimbursement, both if ever, years ago we used to get sped, some reimbursement for sped transportation. We haven't seen that in a decade or two. But, so my thing was to really look at regional school transportation and any help and assistance you could give us as you discuss formulas and so forth for regions is a huge thing. We have often gone to school for school budget passing, even in late June, with no idea what the transportation numbers are going to be. And those are direct pass-throughs to the towns. That impacts the assessment in a large way. And needless to say, when you stand up in front of, sometimes 5 towns, 7 towns, I think Monty Tech must be standing about 15 towns, and you say, I really don't know what we're getting for transportation reimbursement, but what's our best guess based upon the COSET? Because the Senate is oftentimes way, their budget is way after town meeting. There's a huge piece of our budget. So I will shut up and hope that you understand our issues with transportation.
So if I may, I'd offer a couple of thoughts to your constructive commentary to us. I won't take it as criticism. So I'm well aware of the scenario of, but House One generally over the years has been sort of a maintenance or a flatline of what has happened in the previous year. I will say, and that's not because people don't appreciate it in the department need. A lot of that gets driven by, like any sort of, even on a municipal level, budget development. There's certain revenues where we're kind of given a constrained revenue environment generally to put together budget recommendations. We work to prioritize based on that, those revenue limits, what we can move forward, working with the governor, his budget office, the executive office of education. So that's more process. But I will say at the moment, I think the efforts of all of you and through Steve, have started to take some hold. I know generally it's the legislature, so I'm not going to take credit for increasing the line, but this year we saw this current year's significant increase in the line, and I don't know how much people paid attention to the budget bill right now before the legislature. It's a bill, it's an FY18, a last fiscal year supplemental budget. It's needed from the procedural process to close the books of the Commonwealth. There's basically bills that need to get paid, so there are appropriations to fund those bills. It's currently being worked on by both House and Senate Ways and Means. They're trying to conference the stuff at the same time. There is an further appropriation for regional school transportation. I believe it's $7.5 million, Steve, if I'm right. So, and that was, and I'm not trying to give people, I'm not looking to say we're better than the legislature or anything, but that was filed by the governor. And so there is a recognition of transportation costs. And so taking that particular piece a little bit higher, there's a lot of discussion. So I know words aren't actions, but there is a lot of discussion about what the Commonwealth should be doing in examining transportation, school transportation writ large. There's 2 study groups right now, 2 commissions working through the one, a narrow one that we're chairing, which is a commission looking at the cost of homeless student transportation. But this year's budget has a transportation commission led by legislators that's first was focused, I think, primarily stemmed out of regional transportation concerns, but it's designed to actually look at even bigger in the when next time you see Jay, say Bill sent his love at this meeting. But I guess we're not blind to the need, and, you know, we'll see what will happen. We're starting our budget discussions. We work, through our state board. Our board helps provide the messaging where we should focus our priorities. Obviously, as you know, the first dollar that's gonna get sort of put forward first is gonna be Chapter 70. It's just the way, things work with respect to education aid, but that doesn't mean we won't be looking at the other reimbursement accounts as well. I will say there's an additional, in addition to the regional transportation supplemental request the governor filed, there's an additional $12.5 million supplemental request for the special education circuit breaker account as well. So, there's definitely an understanding that from the administration that the state needs to find a way to put. Now that there's a little more revenue in the pie, and the commissioner is actively working to make sure the department gets its share of that increase. Couple of thoughts.
Thank you for the efforts and the support of our we recognize and appreciate it. Anything that can be done to summarize that request to make it more predictable. Many regions were created with regional incentive money, which just disappeared. One of the few state revenue streams expanded to Chapter 71. I recognize the philosophical difference of 100% reimbursement. We've kind of compromised with the 80% request, although that hasn't satisfied all of our members. We just felt that it would be a compromise. But anything that leads to a greater ability to predict what the revenue stream, it takes away one of the variables that causes havoc for us in our budget presentations. And those oftentimes are expected, or even sometimes defined by local charters to be in advance of the House 1 release. So it's an interesting challenge.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever be able to 100% match up the timing needs for municipal or regional budget finalization of the state process. But to pull another name out, you know, when I think about the notion of having, you know, a local aid resolution early in the budget process, you know, in that January timeframe, I think of our friend Jeff Olson, and he's been a long-term advocate for trying to set that, regardless of its as much as you want or whatever, just having that sort of predictability of a number to work from. Because you referenced by the time the Senate comes along with its budget, it's basically Memorial Day by the time that's sort of fine, and that's well past.
That sounds good here.
Yeah, well, and then, but the ultimate finalization of the conference committee sometimes can stretch. In this case, it was fine, I believe the governor signed the budget into law around the 10th or the 12th of July. So you don't really know those final values till really fiscal year's already begun.
That's understood. One of the challenges that regional superintendents and business managers face is that they have to forecast.
Right.
Okay, and you're on the street in a heavy media environment relative to this. So anything that can increase the accuracy, working shoulder to shoulder with you, is particularly helpful. Also, we're going to give some people an opportunity to make some comments about the diversity that we find in the sense of the regional systems. But in the advancement of Chapter 70, and we have been encouraged by multiple professional organizations to support Chapter 70. We recognize the need and the special considerations. But at the local level, we need to see what does it mean for that given LEA, so we can face our school committees and face our public and say, this is a good thing to support. Not a blind support without knowing hold harmless is a tough thing to fight for. But in at least one of the two petitions advanced, in review of conversations at the legislature last year, hold harmless wasn't even in place in both situations. So we support the special needs, the free reduced lunch, the health insurance factors, and the other challenges that some of our systems, whether they're regional or not, face. But we actually need to see almost a printout. What can we support? Can we lock our arms? Can we ask our school committee to endorse the plan and to know what the impact is to us? with that, Mike Bonacani, who has been, as you probably recognize, a leader for the more rural regional systems, and some of the unique challenges that are faced by the rurals. And Mike's going to share some comments with us.
Good morning.
All Mike?
So rurals are a subset for the most part of regionals, but there are municipal rurals as well. So we represent about 10% of the student population in the state. Our biggest struggle really is just being recognized and having some sort of a voice. So we started to get organized a couple of years ago.
Might get you the key.
All right, let me take your seat, Steve. So, we organized a couple of years ago. The reality is we've got a combination of declining enrollment, flat chapter 78, and real rising costs. If you look at actual increases, even with measures taken to try to save money, we're going up at about 2% each year, 2.2% over the past 10 years. So that's squeezing us. And when you're in a rural school where you have smaller schools with a single class per grade, if you have a class of 20 kids and you lose 5 kids, you've got a 25% reduction in enrollment, and you have to pay a 1.0 teacher. So we live in the least rural state in the U.S. other than the District of Columbia. And if we don't do something about this, you're going to find that the rural school districts are all going to become like Lawrence, like the urbans that have been level 4 and level 5 struggling. So we're trying to be proactive here. There's a number of superintendents that have been getting together for a couple of years now working on this. And Senator Hines helped us move forward with this rural school aid. But these are all Band-Aids. We need a combination. I mean, we don't cost much relative to the big picture, but I don't think that we're advocating just to get money to make us whole. We're looking for a combination of some rural school aid that is specific to our needs, and we're looking for some help to leverage and get to create some economies of scale that we can't do on our own. So if you look at, these are based on charter models, but if you look at Oklahoma and you look at Arkansas, they've got a shared services centers that are really designed for charter schools, but the point is to create economies of scale for small schools. We need a partner in Malden that will help us with that. We need a partner in Malden who understands what charters mean in rural districts. I went before the board and there were a bunch of gasps in front of me when Four Rivers was coming up for renewal. If the department just did not renew Four Rivers, 4 or 5 school districts would have been able to buy 10 to 15 years of sustainability. And we're all level 1 and level 2 schools. So this complete lack of understanding of the sticks in Massachusetts is what we're trying to address. We're trying to find a place where we can have a voice in the process. And Mars has been a great place for us to start that conversation, to get on the radar. And I've asked Tom Scott to try to plug us in as much as possible, especially if the formula is up for review. We just need time to review.
Mike, did you want to mention anything about broadband access for our students who are in the western part of the state?
Well, I don't know where that's been stuck, but yes, so the reality is where we are, we lack internet access, so it's just a different world. I grew up in a suburban, and I worked in urban environments. In the rural environment, it's just a different place. So when you have 250 square miles, which is what I have, and it takes an hour to an hour and 15 minutes to transport some of your kids, and you don't have continual access to the internet, you're limited on what you can do. So it's, there's an educational, we're still in the educational piece to this, but we're on limited time here. If we don't do something about this proactively, we're gonna be much more expensive to fix down the road.
Could I just follow up on the broadband? So that whole mass broadband initiative that's being run out of the IT group, it hasn't fully realized itself out in your world?
No, we're hearing 3 to 4 years maybe, but that's been the story for the past 4 years.
And I know some of you think that it's just a western mass problem, but if you look at the districts right in the center of the state, okay, 20 miles from Worcester, you can have 5 towns, and 2 of them have no broadband, and 3 of them do. And so the parents with no broadband are screaming, you can't give these assignments because my students can't do this, which is very legitimate. And so that's 20 miles from Worcester. You're 45, 100, what, 60 miles from Worcester maybe?
Yes.
So I mean, it's just, and I would say the
happy.
up in our Greenfield area. So that's sort of an issue for certainly our rural students. They do not have access.
Even parts of Hampshire County.
Yeah.
Well, the kind of creativity, just to give you an idea here is, so Commissioner Chester, I talked to him about the 4-day school, which he had all kinds of reservations about, so it didn't go anywhere. But if you study states like Colorado, where the 4-day school week is heavily implemented, it came from rural school districts, intended to save money. I don't know that it saved a ton of money, but educationally, they've actually seen gains, and they've saved on average about 2 to 4% in the school budget. And none of those districts are changing their mind after they convert to the 4-day school week. So simply changing the 180-day requirement and just forcing the time on learning piece to give us some flexibility to even look at options, we need that kind of thinking to happen in Monmouth.
I'd like to say that since I've been, I've been at Rutland for 11 years, and just in the past 2 years, since you did your report, since the coalition did your report 2 years ago, it's really a fantastic report, really was. And then it was the impetus for, and all the organizing the basis for getting the rural aid going. Teeny amount of money, 1.5 million, it's complicated set of issues, but then right after that, the department came up with a study, Rob O'Donnell and a few other people wrote a really very good report, as you know, about rural school districts and the needs of rural school districts. And so I would venture to say that you and the coalition and this whole, and Mars have been building momentum. Something is happening. And so here the commissioner's here, the new commissioner, with his ears open, listening, and these are real policy issues. There's a lot to weigh with a lot of different interest groups and stakeholders, but I really think that this is a positive, like it's moving forward. I mean, I know I sound like an idealist, and I've just been here for 6 months, and it would be, but I really feel there's a momentum going on. And then what's going on in the Berkshires, very interesting. There's a lot of movement, there's energy, and we'll see what happens with the rural aid this year. The broadband issue is huge in rural districts. It's critical. The integration between certain virtual tools and serving students is really important. We haven't figured out how to do that well. And I think rural school districts could really benefit from that, and students could. But I'd like to talk more with folks here and with you offline about like what could we do to help with broadband accessibility. And I don't really know, and I would like to hear more about the initiative. So I think that this is, you do have, as you know, you do have support at the department, and we'll do whatever we can to try to really improve how we serve you and what we can do as we manage multiple stakeholders. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I've been at this for 14 years, so I've become kind of the poster child.
Yeah.
And with the turnover at the superintendent level, without continuity, we have to kind of see this through, and I'm trying to get structures in place so that when I turn into a pumpkin, somebody else is there to keep it going.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Our goal, the goal of our colleagues here is not to, is to highlight some of the obstacles we face and ask for your assistance, not necessarily present you with a fix-all benefit to the citizens. We recognize that. And one of the issues that the rural space is that there's a ESE accountability factor that looks at percentages. It's misleading because the numbers can be so small, and therefore the percentage can be so large. So it's just another way of looking at it, digging in to the specifics. So, want to give our executive director, Barbara, a chance to make some comments. Barbara?
Just to wrap up our comments this morning, and I'd like to just put a little bit different light on chapter 70 and small rural schools, and following up on Michael's conversation with you. As we all know, chapter 70 is not a one-size-fits-all funding plan. It isn't even a one-size-fits-most in Western Mass. It's built on some assumptions. It assumes that there are 25 kids in a classroom. It assumes that there are at least 10 classrooms in a building. We might not have 250 children in the whole district. And that'd be spread out over 3 levels of schools. So, in the small rural schools, you still need a principal, you still need, guidance, you need special ed services. You often need a full-time nurse because it only takes one really fragile child with severe whatever that requires the nurse to be there all day. But you don't have 250 children and the funding for 250 children to kind of spread out those costs. So that's the economy of scale that we're talking about, is that you still need certain things. You need custodians, you need a lunch program, you need transportation, but you don't have the economy of scale to portion out those costs. So what can schools do? Well, you can regionalize. Well, 250 square miles, I think Michael's the winner. I think he is. That's a lot of bus time. And so, in researching what some of our schools in other parts of the country have done with long bus rides, they put a teacher on the bus, and internet access, and a laptop in every kid's hand. So that's the extension of the school day. They can do their homework going to school, they can do their homework going home from school. The only trouble is it's really expensive. We don't have the funds for that, and we don't have broadband, so that's off the list. Okay, so now declining enrollments, and now you don't really have, does 6 kids really make a class, a grade? But that's all we have for 4th grade. Well, then maybe we should put 4th and 5th graders together. In some places that works, but in other places, the minute you start talking about that with your parents as a plan for surviving for the next year, they start looking for other schools. And because of the school choice, they're gone. And now you have an even worse problem. You shot yourself in the foot because you have fewer students. So those are some different look at chapter 70. It isn't one size fits all. It does funding for things like ESL. That's a low need for us, but we have high poverty. Because shifting the cost from the state to the local level for funding schools has drained the coffers of the small towns. And they don't have any more to give. And so chapter 70 needs to somehow come up with some different allowances to the unique things of the small rural schools, especially in Western Mass. Every child is entitled to a high quality education, no matter where they're born and where they're raised in the state of Massachusetts. And we try to do that, but it's getting hard.
Fortunately, we're blessed to have a commissioner who's a practitioner, who has served and addressed these capacities in an urban setting. And like the commissioner, and like those represented from the department, Mars represents the entire state. So we wish to be fair and reasonable to the urbans that are represented here, and to the suburban environments, and looking for kind of a win for all to the degree that the state can provide.
Exactly.
So make sure that come across as that
Yes.
sensitivity. And I recognize that decisions oftentimes are made based on populations. How many students would be served by any given investment or strategy. Among the group are a number of vocational technical educators. In spirit of that, I know the commissioner has addressed the Mass Association of Vocational Administrators as part of their executive retreat in Devon's earlier this year, all part of the visitation group. But I'd like to reinforce the fact that as you witness some of the skirmishes and disagreements and disharmony, that is all part of the Massachusetts system, and it's changing superintendencies, that the vocational technical educators are eager to promote career education in all settings, which is not the same as chapter 74. But there's the potential for new partnerships, new sharings, new harmonious relationships, and we welcome your shepherd activity in that process. Okay? People wish to make a comment. Anyone wish to? Yes, please.
Just 2 quick ones. The Lieutenant Governor has done a great job with Community Compact, and when you sign on to that as a town or municipality, you have have access to various categories of resources from the state. However, that isn't extended to a regional, which is an island of its own and its own municipality, unless that one of the towns, member towns agrees to share some of their hours for certain categories with the regional, and some will do that, most will not. Especially for things like internet safety, hacking, the dark web, things like that. We would love, a regional would love to be able to partner with a municipality to share some of their hours, but they need the hours for that, for their own town. Now, when you're in a municipal district, they automatically include them. When you're a regional, you have to talk a town into giving up some of their hours in those various categories. So I was wondering if there's anything that can be done in that or even looked at. Mass Association of School Committees, Regionals Committee had someone come and we talked to them about it, and they were like, that's really something DESE needs to lead. So if it's just something that you can look at or have a conversation with, so that the superintendents have the same access to free resources that the municipalities are given with this great thing that the Lieutenant Governor and Governor are doing. The other thing is to piggyback on to what Maureen Marshall had stated about sped transportation, is I want to talk a little bit about avoidance. And I know that Maureen has a partnership classroom with New England Center for Children in her district that is very costly and doesn't get the same circuit breaker reimbursement as it would for her to send a student to the New England Center for Children. These are amazing programs that school districts cannot duplicate because they just don't have the expertise of staff. They can't afford it to run these programs. So when you have a partner program such as New England Center for Children who will come into your district, you're avoiding sending that very costly, especially from the Quabbin district, to Southborough or to other districts. If you change the circuit breaker, and I know that's something that has to be dictated by legislature, but maybe it's something you can start having a discussion with, so that we can get, especially for our rural towns who don't have these amazing schools that are primarily in the Boston area, it will get these schools to develop these same, like the May Institute or Easter Seals for the 18 to 22 program, those type of programs, we're gonna bring them to your school. The kids will be in their community. These severe needs kids who are going to live, we want them to live in the community, will stay in that community. And that's really what we want, and we have the cost avoidance of these very expensive vans to send them long distances. So it's just something if you could look at that too. Thank you.
Yes, please.
I don't want to. Actually, if you would, sir, 1 second.
Yeah.
I can see you now.
I'm doing the
How are
camera.
we looking on that, okay?
You guys look great on this.
Okay. If I heard you right, and some of this is a little bit of learning for me, what you're proposing is some way for us to create some incentive carve out and circuit breaker for basically in school program development, so you're not doing the outplacements.
It's cheaper, Maureen can speak to it more than me because she was a superintendent who had this program.
Yeah.
It's cheaper to send them out because you're getting the full reimbursement, whereas you're not when they're in.
Well, you get the full, yeah, okay, that's fine.
The exception for transportation is still not.
Right,
So we're in satellite, okay, satellite, the net program in the district.
Right.
And so not only do students have advantage of that program without transportation costs, but sometimes area school districts also tuition their kids, and they just have to travel, 7 or 8 miles to get to the satellite program. So in some way, providing incentives for programs to satellite out into the more rural areas really does help to consolidate service delivery patterns.
Part of this is to promote mainstream, and sending support services to the students in classroom, rather than pulling them out.
Sure.
And to secure, it's a kind of a weird, I guess, process, if in fact you're chasing money at the expense of, you're hoping to support students in a more sensitive way, which is exactly what we recommend everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And not to beat a dead horse, but I don't know if you folks are familiar with the statute with regional transportation. The statute says that the state shall fund at 100% or fully fund, not 80%. And I understand wanting the districts to have skin in the game, but that's not what the statute says. The statute says it should be fully funded. That being said, are you familiar with the auditor's report that came out, was it last October, November, from Suzanne Bump's office? That, you know, pretty much says that we are not being funded to the levels that we should be legally. You know, it's an awful lot of money that we're talking about.
So to be clear, you know, I only started the job this past spring, and before that I was a superintendent for 7 years in Lawrence. So I am keenly aware of underfunding with that.
You know, so I just, you know, didn't want to let the opportunity slip by without commenting on that. At least that's my personal feeling. You know, it says that it shall be fully funded. Doesn't say 80%, doesn't say 65%, just says fully funded, subject to appropriation. And
That's
so,
killing a lawyer
well,
right there.
well, now there's the question, and I said this to the governor right to his eye. What is the definition of appropriate? Okay, that's the act of approving the money. That doesn't mean you get to decide how much money, in my mind, but that could be a legal case. If anyone wants to join a class action, my committee has authorized us to.
I'd be curious,
Explore.
did the governor choose to answer your direct question?
Oh, yeah, he wasn't happy with it, and in his mind, he said, you get torn up. But that's okay, he can have his opinion, I can have mine.
No, that's fine, that's fine.
Louis?
Any insight on the FY20 inflation factor?
Not yet, no.
You asked what the inflation factor is?
Yeah, just as we start the FY20 number, OSD usually comes out, it's probably mid-November, so.
Yeah. So we'll happy to keep you informed.
I just wanted to mention again, I know you're aware of this, but we are all having more growing concerns about when we do go out to bid for transportation, that we're having less and less bids that come in. In fact, we're down to just one bid at this point, and the costs are rising faster than it should be. I think this is not a concern that's just my school district, but I think it's across the state. And I don't know if there's any fix to this, but it's definitely a concern.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the factors. I'm sorry, where are you from?
Neshoba, the Westford.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're acutely aware that there's an imbalance between supply and demand. I'm not an economist, but just basic principle that it's hard to get value if there's no competition. That's one of those factors that folks, gotta, think a little more from a Commonwealth-wide standpoint. It also speaks to some of that would play off of, even though it's not Mike Bonacani specific, but the whole idea of, is there a broader purchasing consortium? Can people kind of put down their local identity? Is there a way to do this in a way that, people contribute, but there's a bigger purchasing group in the mix? I mean, I think everyone's willing to have those discussions. I'll just come back in a second, but, a lot of the times you just gotta get people willing to sort of say, I don't belong to any particular organization. And sometimes that's a difficult thing. It's even tough in state government when we try to do things cross agency, but, we probably will arrive at that point, because, I've heard that message from, my friend Jay all the time, that there's a lack of competition. Sorry, you.
No, I just wanted to harp on your point. That's exactly what we've done in Whitman-Hanson. We've partnered with a neighboring town, even though they're not part of our district, in order to achieve a better busing price.
Are you working with Pembroke or something?
Abington.
Abington.
So just, it works for us.
Green Wave from Abington. I grew up in Dedham, but I live on the South Shore.
Okay, well, hopefully they're going down this Thanksgiving, but that's a different world.
From multiple indicators and reports, the state finances are robust, if you will, or stronger than anticipated for the current year. There seems to be a political preference to put some money in the rainy day fund. Is there any request underway, or might there be, for a supplemental request for additional money for education? Some relative to state finances.
So I think we were all caught a little by surprise with the revenue surge that took place. Most people attribute that to the Trump tax cuts, and people fear that it may be one-time money, so I just want to be clear about that. There is a supplemental budget that is before the legislature currently, in which the governor put forward like an additional $45 million for mental health services for schools, as well as an additional, I would say, 20 or 30 million for targeted supports and things like that. So there are school dollars that are in the current supplemental budget, but it seems like it may be withering on the vine. And so while we have to do kind of long-term Chapter 70 work, and hopefully we'll be informed by some of what we talked about here, and that will take more time. There are some more immediate dollars that are on the table, which, and I hate to say it because I know it's part of the game, but you know, if the legislatures were aware of the need in the schools, and I would argue mental health services and safety are two areas where we probably need some additional resources in addition to other things, right? And people should feel free to avail themselves of talking to their legislators.
Like the federal money that's one-time funds, as long as it's not used for recurring costs, it's still particularly valuable to schools. If you can fix your boiler or whatever else you need to do, then you don't have to take money and redirect it from mental health services to something else. So you can fix one-time things with one-time money. And I know you recognize that, but I'm saying that those who might be hesitant to say, well, it may not be there in the future, that used wisely, it can, for energy conservation, so many other things, it can actually free up other dollars and be particularly helpful to schools. Other questions?
Yeah, just one more. I know there's been some talk about Chapter 70 looking at the ELL, how ELL students get reimbursed and factored into that. In particular districts that have, you know, large number of ELL students still get the same, count as the same dollar value. Any movement on that?
Could you just repeat that question? Okay, this is the probing relative to specific criterion relative to free, reduced, or economically.
No,
disadvantaged.
ELL, time is limited.
I'm sorry.
So-
Okay, and some of the components relative to the Chapter 70, so that there'd be more insight sharing to that.
My general sense is that there was some agreement on kind of the healthcare and transportation,
Mhm.
and where things broke down this past spring were in kind of the ELL and economically disadvantaged
Right.
areas. And so the question now is, with the ability to have some more time, can we get this ironed out? And I'm cautiously optimistic. I think people realize that this has to get sorted out because it's holding up other dollars in other places, not just directed towards some of those districts and students, which are, you know, I personally have a large stake in, but it can't hold up all of the machinery, and I think we need to find a way to start making these fixes.
But I obviously concur with my boss, but I would also say the ELL weighting within the formula is something we'll look at over the course of the next 6 weeks.
Yes.
So I just want to thank everybody for coming today, but in particular, I wanted to thank the commissioner because the focus that you have on celebrating educators is palpable in my district. I think there is enthusiasm for teaching and learning, and I think educators feel well respected, and I think that is attributed to the focus that you have on teachers. So I just want to say thank you for that. Second, I just wanted to make a quick comment about bonus aid. Bill's opening comments talked about bonus aid. I am in a two-town regional school district surrounded by single-town districts. We've been talking about regionalization for several years now, and it stops when they talk about bonus aid because it hasn't been changed for a long time. So if you would just take that into consideration, I know you will, and I just want to say thank you. Quabog Regional.
As affiliates of the regional systems, Commissioner, how might we advance your mission?
You know, I think I just need to keep getting out and talking to people. I want to see this report that was done. So I'll see Mr. Bonaconte. I just need the information, right? At the end of the day, Lawrence, that there was actually another town in Massachusetts. And even in Lawrence, though, I mean, I think because the extreme need there, I didn't poke my head up probably as much as I needed to. And so I really need to learn in a deep way what's happening while kind of getting my message out. I think we have done a lot of systems and structured work, and we need to get back to teaching and learning. I think I'm teaching in North Adams on Friday. We'll see if I remember how to teach, which is something I always did in Lawrence. I probably teach 4 or 5 times a year to remind myself how important and how difficult and demanding that work is. And it's good that it's happening in the western part of the state, because I think in one of the first places I went was in Wacona Regional to do their kind of graduation speech last spring. And there and other visits I've had, I think people have felt that the West hasn't always been given its due. And I want to make sure that all of the children in Massachusetts are getting what they need. So I just appreciate the opportunity to come and hear about some of these things. And hopefully we can start advancing in various ways your agenda and all of the children's agenda in Massachusetts. I think we really need to kind of do a 1993 Part 2, where additional dollars, significant additional dollars were pumped back into the system to kind of figure out where we're going. And while I'm cautiously optimistic that these dollars will continue, there's a small part of me that has seen this great expansion in the country, economic expansion and low unemployment rate going on for years and years, and I'm wondering if another downturn is coming, not to end on a negative note, but I'm going to be cautiously optimistic, but also recognize that, maybe, we are in a situation where in the future we might be struggling even more. So I just want to be, plan for the best, but also, plan and make contingency plans in case things don't go as well as it.
Well, given the passion, the commitment, and your open receptivity to recommendations, we are also optimistic.
Okay.
We do have a business meeting to conduct afterwards. Kevin, did you want to make one?
Oh, I just want to thank Commissioner Gantz for coming. You got with it yesterday.
Twice in 2 days, it's unbelievable. Yeah.
One more question?
Yeah, if I could have one more thing, I'm sorry to monopolize. Sustainability, and coming out of Lawrence in particular. We look at our budget, at least in Whitman-Hanson, and we do receive a good amount of state aid, Chapter 70 funding, and it's $23, $24 million of our budget. But our increase is the minimum per pupil. We see $100 and some odd thousand out of the Chapter 70 increase on an annual basis, and then it's left to our towns who can only raise the levy by 2.5% plus new growth. And they just don't have the infrastructure to raise high enough without overrides, and those aren't popular. And if you even go to an override, and I want to say this properly because I respect teachers and I feel that we don't do a proper service to them in the way that we pay them. We start off a teacher 40, mid-40s, upper 40s, maybe low 50s if they're lucky. And then they accelerate over a 10, 12, 14-year period very rapidly with steps and lanes. And then they sort of get their COLAs. And it's just not sustainable within your budget when you're increasing so rapidly, because that's the bulk of your workforce, and that's your biggest expense. I don't know if DESE is willing to try and come up with a boilerplate with the MTA. To me, the solution is real simple, and that's to take that teacher that you're hiring. You don't hire them at 48 or 49. You hire them in the mid to upper 60s. Give them a good living wage that they can afford to live on and raise a family, but now you control them with a COLA and get rid of steps and lanes completely. That's sort of my mindset.
So I was actually able to do that in Lawrence. So that contract exists, that kind of did away with steps and lanes. We call it a career ladder now, and it doesn't start people at that higher salary, but it enables people that are like high flyers to go quicker on one hand and move up the ladder to make more money. On the other hand, if you're not performing, you don't automatically get a pay raise because you could breathe on the mirror on September 1st when you walked in. So it was a little bit more realistic in what we were trying to get done, because I think
Desi have any appetite to roll that out as a boilerplate
We're gonna
require?
contemplate our appetite, stay tuned.
Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah.